if you told me today that I had to sell my entire collection but only keep one watch and wear that watch for the rest of my life, it would be a Speedmaster, and I'm going to tell you why. Hey guys, welcome back to the Shreve Crump and Low YouTube channel. My name is Jack Tyler, and today I'm super excited to present a little special feature on a watch that has become incredibly near and dear to my heart, the Omega Speedmaster Professional. So when I first started collecting watches, I had a really clear idea for what I wanted. I wanted one watch that was going to do it all, something that was really legible, under 40 millimeters because I have smaller wrists, something that was incredibly versatile, and that led me to one of my first major watch purchases, which was actually an IWC Pilot's Watch Mark 18 with a white dial. Now, of course, we all get our first watch and we convince ourselves, okay, this is it, I'm done, I've got the perfect watch, this is gonna go with everything, I'm gonna wear it every day, and then about 30 seconds, sometimes 40 seconds later, you're like, well, what if I just added one more? And then like a couple years later, you wake up and you're missing a kidney and you've got 20 watches. We all know how this story goes, trust me. So anyways, I'm like, what is gonna pair well with that white dial watch? A black dial watch. And I wanted something, again, super iconic, legible, something with a little bit of history to it, which of course led me to the Rolex Submariner. So I started saving all my money, I was pinching my pennies, and eventually I had enough money to buy the sub. So I walked into the local AD and found out the hard way that, surprise, you can't just buy any Rolex you wanted. Now, with my tail tucked between my legs, I went home and I started doing more research, because of course I wasn't going to give up on adding another watch to my collection. And after a little bit of Googling, on something that was going to be, again, historically significant black dial steel watch, it pretty quickly is going to lead you to the Speedmaster. Now, when I first saw this watch, again, thinking about my ideal, which was that IWC, it didn't really sing for me. I thought, this is busy. What am I going to do with a tachymeter? What am I going to do with a chronograph? I don't need these sub dials. It's 42 millimeters. This watch is going to be too big. But the more and more I learned about the watch, and also the emphatic push from a lot of major people in the watch world that you kind of have to own a Speedy at some point to be considered a true watch person, which, we can take that with a grain of salt, I eventually made the decision to purchase one. Admittedly, for the first year of owning it, I actually didn't wear it all that much, but now it's become my daily driver, and I'm going to tell you a couple of the reasons why I fell in love with the Omega Speedmaster. Released in 1957, the Omega Speedmaster, though you might not know, was never actually intended to go into space. It was a response to the popularity of Rolex's professional line in conjunction with the Railmaster and the Seamaster. Now, if you found your way to this video, I'm sure that you're at least partially aware of the history behind the Speedmaster and its inherent connection to NASA, but I think it's worth sharing a little bit about it because, at least for me, the historical significance of a watch that I'm interested in purchasing has become extremely important. Whether it's a world event, like in the case of the Speedy, or merely a first in the world of horology, I know that I've become more and more fascinated with these moments in time that these great watches end up representing. And I think all of us know that the Speedmaster sits as one of the most important models of all time. So we obviously have to talk about the history of this watch. I mean, after all, it was the first watch to go to the moon, kind of a big deal. But what some collectors may not know is that before it was dubbed the Moonwatch as we know it today, it was actually a chronograph designed for car racing, hence the name Speedmaster. During the mid-60s, NASA deemed it necessary to standardize the equipment that astronauts would be taking into space during the Apollo trials. Watches from Rolex, Breitling, and Omega were subjected to a grueling series of tests, and only the Omega survived, which is why to this day it is the only officially flight-certified watch by NASA. And of course, it found its way to the moon in 1969, strapped under the wrist of Neil Armstrong as he made his first steps on the lunar surface, a fact that Omega doesn't mind reminding us just about every chance they get. Now, being a bit of a history buff like me, I'm grateful that Omega, despite having millions of versions of the Speedmaster, still produces a base model in steel that is nearly identical to the ones worn by the heroes on Apollo 11. Owning this watch is kind of like having a small piece of that history on your wrist. Now, speaking of variations, that brings us to reason number 2 why I love the Speedmaster. Now look, it can be a little bit overwhelming. There are so many different versions of this watch, whether they're limited edition, special edition, there's just a lot of them out there. But if you fall in love like I have, it also means that you have the rest of your life to continue to collect them. And what I also like is there's kind of something for everyone. Whether you have a hole in your collection where you're looking for something like the original as a tool watch, or something a little bit more dressy, or something in a fun dial configuration, the Omega Speedmaster line has you covered. Now, if you're brand new to Speedmasters and you're a little overwhelmed by all of the options, I would definitely suggest going and trying some on at your local AD, such as Shreve, Crump & Lowe here in Boston. You want to try on the classic Hezolite and the Sapphire offerings, but also don't forget about the racing models and some of the dark sides of the Moon, because they can be really surprisingly fun and have a lot of character on the wrist. So now I'm going to take a second and share with you some of my favorite variations of the Speedmaster. Starting off with the Ultraman Speedy reference ST145.012, which was released in 1968. This iconic reference was featured on the Japanese television show The Return of Ultraman in 1971, which of course gave it its nickname. Fans of the Ultraman got a treat in 2018 when Omega released the Speedy Tuesday 2, paying homage to the original Ultraman watch. Now, next up on my personal list is the CK2998. This iteration uses the same lugs and case profile as the first Omega in Space Edition, but has a ceramic bezel with a pulsation scale. These subtle touches and the red accent on the dial really set this watch apart from its monotone ancestors. Now, the last noteworthy Speedmaster on my list is the Alaska Project. This super cool variant of the Speedmaster was actually based on a prototype to withstand extremely cold temperatures and conditions similar to those on the dark side of the Moon. Now, the prices on these can range anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000, but for the right collector, it might just be worth it. Now, one of the final things that I grew to really appreciate about the Speedmaster was actually its price, and by saying that I really mean that the value that you get when you purchase this watch. Now, in my opinion, the Speedmaster rules the sub $10,000 price range, not just because of the history that we've already mentioned, but also because of the technical specifications. With the newest variation of the Speedmaster Professional retailing at $6,400 for the Hezolite version and $7,200 for the Sapphire, it's pretty hard to argue that this isn't one of the best value propositions among its competitors. With a Metos certified caliber 3861 that combines the coaxial escapement rated up to 15,000 Gauss of magnetic resistance, the Omega definitely over-delivers for its price point. For comparison's sake, a Rolex Daytona retails for $13,100, almost double the cost of the Hezolite model. Now, these aren't exact comparisons, but we thought it'd be fun just to throw in a few alternatives to the Speedmaster in case you were wondering. Now, number one on our comparative list is the Zenith Chronomaster Sport, which sells for $10,000. Now, the Zenith Caliber 3600 is a revolutionary movement for the brand, something exciting in an otherwise pedestrian lineup of the usual suspects. We also have the Breitling Premier Chronograph, which retails for $8,400 and comes with a manually wound column wheel chronograph movement that is also quite impressive. It's quite a different watch than the Speedmaster, but I think that it does deserve some consideration if the Speedy just isn't your thing. In conclusion, I think that there is something for everyone to love about the Omega Speedmaster, whether it's the incredible history of this watch or all the different versions that you could possibly add to your collection. I know for me, it's become one of my favorite watches, and I hope that you give it a chance too. Now, if you're interested in trying on a Speedmaster or any other part of Omega's incredible lineup, please keep in mind that Shreve, Crump & Lowe is Boston's only authorized dealer for the watch, so feel free to stop by our 39 Newbury Street location, or of course visit our website shrevecrumpandlowe.com, where you can view all of our available inventory. I really hope you've enjoyed this video and learning a little bit more about the Speedmaster. Thanks again for spending a little time with us here today.